Ever notice how nicotine replacement therapy doesn't actually help you quit smoking? You've probably seen people using patches and gum, or you might have tried it yourself, only to fall back into the smoking habit. That's because nicotine replacement therapy only addresses a small fraction of the addiction of smoking, which is the physical aspect, the nicotine relating to smoking. There's a far greater aspect of smoking, which is the psychological subconscious triggers, which don't get addressed through nicotine replacement. So let's think about this logically. If nicotine is the biggest aspect of smoking, and all you would have to do is find a safer alternative to getting nicotine rather than the cigarette, then nicotine replacement therapy would have a huge success rate. What we see instead is that nicotine replacement therapy only has roughly an 8% success rate. So the reason why this is because, as I mentioned before, the nicotine is just a small fraction of the habit. There's far greater psychological aspects at play that keep smoking alive, specifically how smoking is tied to different routines. So, and different situations like stress and breaks and all these other areas that I've spoken about, and at a deep level, is smoking is tied to specific events, either stress, breaks, after meals, with coffee, with beverages, to take a break or to have time to reflect. Smoking is a behavior that is tied to these events. Now, nicotine is just a small component, and 8% is not a very big success rate, which again shows you how small the physical aspect of addiction is. Now, we can look at this even further. If nicotine was as addictive as heroin, as some people like to say, then nicotine would be waking you up in the middle of the night multiple times in sweats because you would be withdrawing, right? After a few hours of going to sleep, you would be waking up in a puddle of your own sweat, or you would be sweating profusely on a plane because your nicotine would be out of your system and you would be that physically dependent on nicotine. But obviously, that's not what happens. You can go on a flight for 10 hours and not really, and maybe have some craving to smoke, but really that craving is coming out of boredom, which is another trigger, a common trigger, as opposed to nicotine withdrawal, right? Most people can go on a flight, watch a movie, take a nap, and have basically no cravings whatsoever. Or they could be in a pool swimming, maybe for 30 minutes to an hour and have no cravings. Or, again, they can sleep all night without waking up in cold sweats because nicotine is playing a far smaller role than people tend to realize. So the far better way to quit smoking is to start to address these triggers. Start to address the subconscious associations that you have to smoking and these specific events, whether it be breaks, stress, after meals with beverages, whatever the triggers are for you. Those are just the common ones that I'm mentioning. Other people, people might have very specific triggers, and you have to identify those triggers first and foremost, because when you start to tackle those triggers and start to um, get rid of the association, break the association between smoking and these triggers, that's how you actually can quit without, craving nicotine or without having to rely on crutches like patches or gum, and without having to worry that you'll relapse if you make one slip up, right? So it's a much more stable way of quitting when you start to change your mental associations to these triggers. So, you know, if you don't want to be, manipulated by tobacco companies, nicotine companies, if you want a much more stable way of quitting long term, then go ahead and hit subscribe because I'll be releasing videos like this, as well as practical tips that you can take to ease cravings and break associations. I'll be releasing videos like this every single day. So go ahead and hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.